Greenhouse production in Ghana is becoming prominent. We advise everybody to go into it because it helps more than the open field production, especially for produce like tomatoes, sweet pepper, cucumber. You get much yield if you are doing the greenhouse production. You don't need a lot of space. Even with a little space, you can do a whole lot and harvest more. So what we advise people is, if you want to go into greenhouse production, we recommend people to go for the V shape. And even if you are already in the sector and you are already having the dome shape, there are modifications that can be done to it. If you go to either Safisana or Agri-impact, you contact any of us, we can give you an advice on the modification to do.
First green came in at a time when this structure has already been completed. So it was then difficult for us to make changes. But the few changes that they recommended and we did, we've seen improvement. And that has helped us a lot. In fact, that has also given us the confidence, to be able to at least revamp this place. If you look at the greenhouse, for example, we didn't have this net before, and the temperature was so high, beyond the acceptable temperature. So they recommended that we put a net at the top to reduce the temperature and the heat effect. So we did. But there are some of the recommendations that we could not do because we felt that it would not be cost effective to do that. Instead, it would be better to put those investments into building a new greenhouse that will comply with the required standards.
So Fresh Green was a project that we were part of that is supposed to look at the whole greenhouse infrastructure in Ghana and find ways to improve it and make it more sustainable so that more people can go into the production of vegetables using protected horticulture. The project was mainly about collecting data, both internal and external, and using models to figure out what were the easiest ways to implement greenhouses in Ghana. So the external influences were cost of greenhouses, which ones were the most economically viable in terms of size, in terms of costs. Internal factors, we're looking at things like how do you measure heat, how do you measure humidity, how do you measure all the elements that are going on inside the crop. Some of the input prices, input availability, produce handling, temperature controls. Those are some of the things that the project looked at. And so the recommendations the project is coming out with are all based on all of these factors and how to get them to a sweet spot where the typical Ghanaian can go say, okay, I am going to the greenhouse industry and I have enough knowledge to be able to go out and do this sustainably.
The first phase of the project brought in weather stations. The project funded us with weather stations that we installed at Premium Foods, Urban Jungle, and also Agri-impact greenhouse locations. These weather stations help us to take data weekly about what is going on in the structure in terms of its humidity, wind, direction, and everything. And this information at the end of the day is being collated and sent to Wageningen University, our partners over there, who analyze the information and put meanings to it. Then we send the information back to the farmers, and which pre-inform them on what they are supposed to do, on probably if they have to change something in their production system, if they have to do something to their structure to help regulate the humidity and the wind direction. That will help their vegetables to grow much more healthy for them to get much produce. The weather station has been so much helpful because it has helped the partners in the projects like Urban Jungle, Agri-impact for us, and also Premium Foods to be able to make some changes to our structures and also on how we should follow our protocols and other stuff.
Some of the recommendations were, some of them are standard recommendations in the greenhouse industry, is how to position a greenhouse so that you get a maximum airflow, how to position the greenhouse so that you get maximum light for the crops. In our case where the infrastructure already is sitting, a lot of those recommendations don't make a difference to us. But for people who want to start anew, positioning a greenhouse so it's absorbing the most light and most air becomes a high recommendation. We compared greenhouses like ours that are at very high elevations to those that are in low-lying areas in Accra, right? Looked at what the prevailing temperatures were here and then the kinds of yields we're getting versus those in the valley. You realize that up here where we have cooler temperatures, up here where we have more airflow, we were doing better than the guys down in the valley. So things like enhancing the airflow in the greenhouse became a huge part of the recommendations. So even here we are working to improve the airflow. We keep making sure that the netting around is porous enough to allow air to flow easily. We are installing airflow fans to move the air along and then push it up so that the air flows the way we want it to. That alone would also bring down the temperature of the facility, right, and help our flowers advance to fruits.
The project also seeks to address our post-harvest losses in the country. In this, what we did was we brought in sensors that we put in produce at the time of harvest. We track it from the harvest point to where the final consumer purchases the goods and see whether the state of the produce has changed over the period of its transport, whether it is still fresh and healthy, and also we compared it to the local markets. We also did an analysis of transporting the produce from the local markets when those who do open production. We went all the way to Burkina Faso to do the analysis. We put the sensor in the produce and tracked it all down to Ghana, and for the period of 1 week that it traveled, and when the consumer is buying it, how was the produce as compared to the analysis that we did in the greenhouse, and realized the greenhouse own stays longer than the local production.
During one of our seminars, one of the facilitators drew our attention to the fact that sometimes the greenhouse might not be bad. You might have a very good land, but where you even position it towards the wind direction, towards other climatic conditions, can let the greenhouse be effective or not. So I think it's very crucial for you to follow the Fresh Green Ghana's recommendation when you are setting up a greenhouse structure. One of the game changers was the Testo device. It was a hygrometer which measures temperature and humidity in the greenhouse. So we hanged it in the greenhouse. And obviously there was also another weather station here where data was being captured for the environs, and then at the end of every 2 weeks or so it is sent to us. It was one of the key changes for us, because when we were analyzing the data, we realized that sometimes it's very, very cold outside, but you go inside and very, very, very hot. Sometimes we get extreme, especially in the night, very, 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 very cold in the greenhouses, but not that cold outside. So the two things, because the EC and pH meters were already using it, but the weather station and the climate, the internal climate check really, 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 really helped us, because then it will inform you when to pollinate, when to spray, when to drop the plant, when to trellis, because for tomato needs a certain humidity and temperature for the pollen grains to fall. So when you go in there and check on the hygrometer, you know that it is right time for you to maybe shake the plants or use your artificial pollinators. Yeah.
It's a very challenging industry to start with. So you go in with your eyes wide open. There's a lot of technical information out there to consider, like the recommendations that are coming out of this project. I would suggest anybody going into this look at all the economics that are involved in this, determine what the break-even size, break-even crop types, break-even crop quantities are, and understand how long it will take you to achieve that break-even, how much resource you need to put in, and for how long before you reach that break-even point, before anybody jumps into this industry, because this industry is not for the faint of heart. People look at it from the outside and think, oh, it's just a building with crops. it's actually more difficult to grow in this environment than it is to grow in the open field. But once you decide to take the leap, it makes sense for us to look at all the technical data and build a facility that is well optimized to take advantage of the environment in which we are.
Greenhouse production is like taking care of a baby. If you don't have time for it, you will get it wrong. But if you really have time for it and you follow the protocol from start to finish, you are really going to make a good harvest. For instance, certain little things like having a foot bath in front of the tunnel is important, because the foot bath prevents you from taking any insect outside into the structure. And there are certain things, the pruning regime, the time that you have to prune, you need to prune, because you can't let the leaves overtake the fruits. Sometimes the leaves is also competing with the fruits for the nutrients. So the right time for pruning, you have to prune, and all those things. All these protocols have been laid out throughout the project, and it's been well documented. So if you go to the project website, you get all this information. Or if you walk into any of the partners, that's Safisana, Agri-impact, Premium, Hortifresh. Hortifresh was also a partner. They came on board. Hortifresh also does training for people in this sector. They even have a quarterly training that they do for people who wants to go into greenhouse production. So we are thinking of forming an association. Having an association that brings everybody on board we can help each other to solve our issues and also go a long way. So this association is being formed to help us. So anyone who is out there who is into the vegetable production in greenhouse structures can join this association, so that we help share ideas and help build in this industry. In greenhouse vegetable production, it is very important to start off from the right foot from day one. Even before the moment you have the idea of going into greenhouse vegetable production, you have to start off from where should I start from? Who should I talk to? You have to talk to the right people and get the right information, because if you start off from the wrong foot, you will get it totally bad, because it's capital intensive. Because it's capital intensive, if you don't do it right, you lose a lot of money. So with the findings from the project, if you follow everything from start, especially knowing the type of structure that will be good for you in your location, do the feasibility assessment of your location first to know whether you should even put up a greenhouse structure there or not. And even if you have to put a greenhouse structure there, what type of greenhouse structure are you supposed to put on that location? And after putting up the structure too, you should know that you have to follow the right protocols from onset, because not following the right protocols, you are just investing your money that you are not going to get return. But if you follow the right protocols, you did the right feasibility study, and you talk to the right people, you are really going to make it. So it is very important that you start from the right place and do the right things at the right time. But if you don't, you are really going to get it all wrong, and it is really going to cost you. But as I said, if you are already in the system, you've already started production, as I said, you can do modification to your structures. Do modification to your structures, and also get the right people to teach you what to do. You can scrap everything that you are doing in the structure and get the right protocols from start, even though you might have lost something in the past, but you can regain something out of it if you start following the right protocol. But I advise you seek the right advice and get it right from the onset before you lose at the end.